Go to our website and click on McMullen's Eagles coverage to get the very best Eagles insight from all over the Delaware Valley. And day 2 of the Eagles OTAs, John, a day free of Sam Bradford drama, right?
Well, there's no drama because we're not allowed in today. So the only media access was Tuesday. We're allowed back next Tuesday. So
I want to ask you one Sam Bradford question, just one. Sure. The whole concept of him, open arms, everybody. Did you get the feeling yesterday that everybody was like going out of their way to welcome him back?
No, I think everybody was trying to downplay it more than anything else, and I think that was the approach most of the players took, and I think they did a good job for the most part, and they certainly want to move on, and everybody kind of painted it as a business decision, and players don't like to get into other players' business when it comes to that because they realize at a certain time in their careers, they could be mixed up in a similar thing, whether it's contract-related, trying to get an extension. So whether it's Fletcher Cox, whether it's Darren Sproles, Sam Bradford, anybody having some kind of issue with the organization, it sort of turns into a mob mentality, an omerta, so to speak. It's just everybody stays quiet and stays out of their business, and that's how they try to approach things.
John, on the field, a couple of interesting stories you wrote about, observations at 97.3 ESPN.com, and I thought yesterday Peterson coming right out and handing the job to Alan Barbary. Now, do you think that is a wide-open competition? Do you think Barbary will continue to be that guy until he loses the job? Because to me, that was a little bit of a surprise. I know we touched on it yesterday, but reading some more and then going back and listening to Doug Peterson's comments, he did say right now it's Alan Barbary, but he commented on the depth, and I was a little surprised because I thought one of the things that bothered me about Chip Kelly last year was he handed those guys jobs. There was no competition. So I'm hoping that Peterson understands that competition is a good thing.
Yeah, and I think he does. I think that was more of a nod towards the incumbency and the fact that he was the starter last season. He's going to start as the starter again. But there is going to be a competition, and he kind of contradicted himself a little bit and I think when he called him his guy, it was more of this is his opportunity, and it is. If he stays at the top of the depth chart, he's the champ, so to speak, so he's got to be pinned or knocked out and to lose the title, but he can certainly lose the title, and there's a lot of people sort of at his heels shooting for it. First and foremost, Isaac Seumalo, who isn't there because of he has to go back to college because they're in the quarter system at Oregon State. So he'll be back for training camp, and I think that's when the real competition starts.
One guy I didn't bring in real quick on that was Wisniewski, and from what I understand, and you can maybe speak further on this, he was not in the left guard rotation. Was he taking second team center reps, or was he rotating at left guard? Because I think a lot of people felt that he would be the top guy on the depth chart.
Yeah, and I was one of those people. But no, he started as the backup center. He didn't get any reps at left guard. But remember, that's the first day in OTAs, and you sort of want to rotate people in and look and for day one, it was Josh Andrews on the third string left guard. The second string was Malcolm Bunch. So those are younger players, and I don't think they're going to be real challenges to Barber. I think the real challenges are eventually when they move Wisniewski over, and once, as I said, when Seumalo gets back. I think those are the real guys he has to hold off and win the job from. But this is just one day in May. So eventually people will get looks at other positions and not necessarily, you can't read too much into where they start at particular positions, especially with a guy like Wisniewski, because he's got so much experience they're not really concerned if they have to move him at the last moment. They can do it because they know he can handle it. Malcolm Jenkins, to give you an example, he talked about it. If you remember last year, Mike, he didn't take one snap at the nickel position for the first 3 weeks of training camp because Chip Kelly and Bill Davis understood if they needed him, he could play that position. And they did need him to do it. In week 1, he was the nickel corner. So that's what you have, a little bit of insurance with a veteran player that you know can do it.
Yeah.
You want to look at the young players and see if they can do it.
How different, speaking of Malcolm Jenkins, how different is the secondary? I know yesterday I thought you had an eye-opening comment that Leotis McKelvin was head and shoulders better than the next cornerback of the group. They made a concerted effort the last 2 years, John, to remake that secondary. Last year, they went high in free agency with Byron Maxwell. This year, they went to mid-level free agents with Leotis McKelvin and Ron Brooks, and they also went through the draft with some lower-round picks. What is that secondary? How different is that secondary? Because it seems like Jenkins, the last 2 years, has been the only guy that keeps surviving.
Yeah, and he's obviously the leader and a very good player, certainly the best player they have in the secondary. I think they feel very comfortable at safety because obviously they have Malcolm and they signed Rodney McLeod, and they have very, very high hopes for him. They think he's a similar coverage guy as Walter Thurman was, but a much better hitter, a much better intimidator, better in run support. And I think people are going to enjoy watching him play because he really understands the position, has natural instinct. So I think they're set at safety. Corner, though, is a big issue. And as we said, there's no doubt in my mind Leotis McKelvin can handle and play very well at a very high level. But he's a 30-year-old guy now who has had a lot of injuries in his career. And history says he's going to get banged up at some point. So you're going to need – you can never have enough cornerbacks. And while the Eagles have some talented guys, Eric Rowe being one of them, they're not proven, and they haven't done it. So to assume they're going to be able to do it at this level is probably asking a little bit too much. Nolan Carroll will eventually be back. He'll help. You mentioned Ron Brooks. He got the first nickel snaps, and that's similar to last season. The Eagles know in their back pocket if they need Malcolm to do it, he can do it. But Jim Schwartz would rather have a traditional nickel cornerback because if you have that, all of a sudden you don't have all these moving parts in the secondary where you have a safety sliding down. You have to insert another safety. Last year it was Chris Maragos. Now, unfortunately for him, Mike, he started out on the third team at safety.
Are you talking about this year?
Yes. So clearly this staff does not think as highly as Chris Maragos as the previous staff because the second team safeties were Jalen Watkins and Ed Reynolds. And Jalen obviously has been a corner in the past. So Chris has got some work to do with this new staff. They obviously don't think as highly as him.
John McMullen's with us, 97.3 ESPN.com here on the Bash. You wrote yesterday about the receiver struggles, and nobody wants to hear that. I mean, and that goes into the some of the Bradford stuff. Well, if the receivers were better, they didn't drop so many passes. It sounds like the Matthews, Aguilar, Huff trio is still having problems and struggling, and adding Ruben Randall to the mix doesn't seem like it's helped early going anyway.
Yeah, and remember, it was a rainy day. The ball was slick. There was a lot of drops, but that word is going to scare people because we saw how many drops there were last season from that group, and the core remains with Matthews, Aguilar, and Huff. I don't think there's any question if he's healthy, Ruben Randall is going to be a starter in that group. I think Josh Huff would be the odd man out, so I think it's going to be a threesome of Matthews, Randall, and Huff when they're in 11 personnel. Aguilar when they're in 11 personnel, which is 3 receivers, 1 running back. And I think it's better because I think Randall's a better player than Josh Huff. But we talked about just how poorly Nelson Aguilar did in his rookie season. And there were some injury concerns.
And Randall, let's say this, John. He was inconsistent with the Giants. I think there were some Giant fans that were happy that he walked out the door because he was very frustrating.
Yeah, he's a very, very talented guy. He's a lot like Jordan Matthews in the fact that he loses concentration, and you'll see these drops at times that you shouldn't see, and you'd rather have consistency at the wide receiver position, obviously. Also isn't the greatest runner in the world, and you've seen a lot of Eli Manning interceptions over the years because Reuben didn't run the right route on a particular play. So that's a concern, but hey, he's talented. He really is, and you could see just how much more talented he is than guys like Huff and Aguilar as far as catching the football. So I think eventually I don't want to say the cream is going to rise to the top because I don't think this is a very good group, and it's probably one of the biggest concerns on this team as a whole, as it was last season. But he is better than the alternatives, and that's what you have to kind of lean on.
Hey, we know the defense is going from 3-4 to 4-3, and there's a lot of former linebackers that are moving into deep back, or some of them back into defensive end roles. I think people forget Connor Barwin kind of excelled as an end in Houston before he came over to Philadelphia. Graham was an end, then he was a linebacker. Curry was, Lord knows what he was the last couple of years. I don't know what Smith was ever intended to be. There's some murkiness on who picked him. Roseman's taking the falling on the sword, as you would say, for that one. Maybe he's an end in the NFL. But that being said, the 4-3 wide 9, do they have the personnel to play that with these guys?
Yeah, I think they do. I think between the three top guys, and that's Vinny Curry, Brandon Graham, Connor Barwin, I think they're good enough pass rushers to get it done. And I'm not too concerned about their defensive end play unless they have significant injuries. Then you start to worry. But any team could say that about any position. I think one of the most excited people about the move from back to a 4-3 is Vinny Curry, because he's a natural 4-3 player, and you kind of saw how he was out of place in Bill Davis's scheme. So it's going to suit him very well. Brandon is a natural 4-3 player. I think, as you said, people forget that. He came in as a 4-3 player, played 4-3 at Michigan. So he's very excited also. Connor's the one I'm concerned with because he's a natural 3-4 player, and he's never been asked to do this before. And it was a little bit of a surprise to me that he was taking the first-team reps over Brandon Graham. He's very, very important to this organization, not only in the football sense, but off the field, as far as the charity work he does, as far as how he embraces the city of Philadelphia. So I think they want him to succeed at so many levels, but I just don't know if he's a fit for this Jim Schwartz scheme.
We'll see. It's been a little while since his Houston days, and he has been pretty good at his position here in Philly in the 3-4. But you're right. We'll see who and how they rotate those ends in that 4-3 defense there. And how about the linebacker spot? How come Hicks is not out there? This isn't still from the pec injury, is it?
No, he had some tightness in his legs, is how Doug Peterson described it. So he was held out in team drills as a precaution. He did do some individual work. So, but, I've told you about that in the past, Mike. I have a concern dating back to Jordan Hicks at Texas. A lot of injuries, and it's not the same injury. Mm-hmm. You almost kind of say, like Sam Bradford with the double ACLs, you almost say that's bad luck. But this is a guy who continuously has gotten injured, and they've been different injuries. So at some point, I'm not sure if you can count on him being out there for 16 games. And that's a concern because they lack depth at that particular position. Najee Good was taking the snaps in his place yesterday. The backup to the backup is Joe Walker, the rookie 7th-round pick from Oregon. So it kind of tells you how thin they are at that position. And Doug even admitted that earlier this offseason when he said Jim Schwartz, before the draft, was begging for numbers at linebacker. He just needs more bodies there.
And they didn't really get many more bodies through free agency or the draft. A lot of the guys they're going to have to go with are guys that were holdovers here. John McMullen has more on the Eagles' OTAs over at 97.3 ESPN.com. And when is the last day of OTAs? Is that tomorrow?
Well, this group, it starts again next Tuesday. So they get Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday for 3 straight weeks.
Right, but this first group, I mean, is that the
final, first group, yes.
Is done
tomorrow. One will be tomorrow, and then it restarts on Tuesday of next week, and that's the day of media access again. And they'll go Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then they have a third week on the 24th where there'll be media access, and they'll go Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
And then the June 7th or June 3rd, is the mandatory?
June 3rd, I think June 7th through the 9th, I believe, is the mandatory minicamp, and June 3rd is the last OTA date.
They're going to be kicking off before we know it.
They are.
I mean, seriously, this thing's flying.
It really is 12 months a year now, as you can tell. It rarely ends. The one sort of respite you get is between the mandatory minicamp and training camp, and in a lot of ways, that's when coaches and GMs around the league hold their breath because guys leave the facility, and the last thing you want is young people with money having time on their hands and not having to go to work. So everybody kind of holds their breath and prays that nobody gets in trouble.
All right. At JF McMullen. John McMullen covers the Eagles and the NFL for 97.3 ESPN.com, and you can check out his national football coverage as well at today's Pigskin, where all the NFL teams getting closer to those mini camps. Boy, oh boy, this thing is flying by. All right, John, we'll talk tomorrow, pal.
Hey, thanks, Mike.